Welcome to BALLBUSTERS Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. If you'd like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they're live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below this video. Now, we are joined by a whole bunch of incredible people. We have the Adam Meakin. How you doing?
Good evening, Nathan. Evening, everyone.
Good evening, good evening. And we also have... we'll do a couple of intros first. So we've also got Sleeping Warrior. How you doing?
Woohoo!
Woohoo! We have got Quantum Eraser. Nice to have you here.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. We also have Betty von Valsen. How you doing?
Yeah, hello. Good evening, everyone.
And last but by no means least, we have Ranty Flat Earth. Good to see you, sir.
Good evening, Nathan. Nice to see you as well.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. So we are taking, obviously, advantage of an opportunity that has opened up in the advent of... the advent? That's the right word, isn't it? The advent of Globebusters?
Dunno.
Globebusters isn't here.
It's your language, so you should know, right?
I shouldn't I? We're filling the void where Globebusters has left a gap. So there is definitely an opportunity to meet an audience who are looking for flat Earth information and goodness. So that is precisely what we have done. So this is technically like a pilot show. So it may just be one, maybe a one-off, maybe a start of an era. We just don't know. But there's definitely an opportunity. And without sugarcoating it too much, the opportunity has come, in my humble opinion, as a direct result of a misunderstanding about science. So, where shall we start, ladies, or lady and gentlemen?
I know where we should start.
Go on,
It's been an interesting day at the races, Nathan. It's been an interesting day at the races, Nathan. We've got one horse lagging miles behind everybody else. We've got two or three keeping up with the pack. And we've got one horse that's fucked off out the racetrack with his tail between his legs and was last seen off into the distance with a black Frisian eating donuts and drinking coffee. That's how it is.
Well, this isn't actually a race, so things can change in a heartbeat on flat Earth. But does any of you want to summarise the current science situation that finds us on this happy Sunday evening?
Well, can I just say one thing? That I am absolutely, really, really disappointed that there's no Globebusters this evening, because I absolutely do enjoy watching their show.
Yeah, that's fair.
And whatever's gone on in the background, whatever the reasons are, the way that this is going is wrong. The reality is that we all know that it's not a sphere, right? How we get to the goal at the end of it is... It's a journey, and we're all on our own journey. And some of us are new to it, some of us are veterans, some of us are somewhere in the middle. But we all realise that Bob not being in this discussion in any way is wrong. Whether he's right or wrong is irrelevant. He should be in the discussion, and he should be on Globebusters, and there should be a show. It's that simple. For whatever reason, unbeknown to, well, maybe we can all speculate. No one really knows what the cause is. Oh, sounds a bit like science. But anyway,
no pun intended.
No pun intended. But the reality is he's not around at the moment, which is bad because, yeah, you could blame me, you could blame science, you could blame wrong type of snow, wrong leaves. But for whatever reason, he's not here. Don't know exactly the reason why. And we could speculate, but we're not going to speculate. I think what we should do is have a discussion about the issue at hand. The only issue at hand, no distractions, no fluff, no drama, no personalities. The one topic that's on the table that everybody's now acutely aware of. Let's talk about gyroscopes.
I'd second that in a way, Tony. I'm not here to discuss Globebusters tonight. I'm gutted, like most Earthers. It's been part of my Sunday evening, and it's always upsetting when it's not on, or when Bob takes a break. But for me, respect Bob, have a break, mate. You know what I mean? The shit with the documentary and the bollocks you're putting up with, have a break. This isn't, for me, I've not come here in any form of replacing Globebusters. We know it's not on, and there is a great topic that really should be had. And I look forward to when Bob's ready to come and join it, because his voice is important in all of this. And I look forward to it being heard when he's ready.
Okay. So quick chronology for historical purposes of what's happened. Globebusters show last week, Nathan and Bob had a bit of a disagreement over the gyroscopes and what they actually mean. Now, it's a little bit of a parallel universe, this, because we've been banging this drum for God knows how long about the scientific method, what it proves, what it doesn't prove, all the points that the ballers bring up, and how basically none of it is science. It's all pseudoscience. And the reason for it, of course, is that you've got to manipulate that independent variable. I played that song a lot on the last couple of shows. Wiggle it just a little bit. That's really pertinent, because if there's a cause to an effect, then you've got to wiggle it. Now, basically, on the show, the show concluded with a half confession, which was basically, we realized that it's not science. However, it was followed by basically 2 hours worth of discussing all the ins and outs of the gyros. Now, if you're going to declare and denounce the gyro, then don't spend 2 hours talking about it, because it reifies the point that you're making, which is supposed to be that this is not science. Perhaps the better scenario would have been to declare the science as non-science, declare it as pseudoscience, and then within the next 1 or 2 sentences, wrap the point up. Perhaps it should have been the case that, yes, these gyros aren't science, therefore, and not forgetting the fact that Bob didn't do anything himself, somebody else did something, but he definitely didn't prove anything, because the gyroscopes measure something, but they don't prove what the cause of this measurement is. And that would have been it. Bob would then have been able to walk freely, not being credited or accused of proving something, because he didn't. Somebody else may have done something, but he didn't do anything. And he wouldn't be in this this position now where he's getting attacked from all angles, including Flat Earth. I realise that Bob's feeling fragile, partly because of us, maybe, partly because of the documentary, partly because of the ballers, partly because of Joe Blogs on the street, random people that aren't in the discussion that may have got involved in somehow, I don't know. But he's fragile, and the pressure must be relentless, and I don't envy that position. But that was where the show finished. The conversation about gyroscopes. Does anybody want to take over from what happened after the show?
Well, not really, but I would like to just say that, anybody being put under that kind of pressure and scrutiny is going to have an effect on. If it was me and I was under the microscope like that, I'd want to take a break too. So if that's the case, I mean, I don't know. I'll be honest, I do not know what's gone on. So if any of you guys have any information, I've been out of the loop the past week, so. But I just want to say that anybody being under that kind of pressure, they deserve a break.
Well, considering it was mostly Anthony saying he doesn't want to make this personal, I'm pleased that you've brought it up, because you've kept it very even-handed. But I do want to make an official line for any flatties out there that have this crap parroted to them in their comment section, or in a debate in a comment section that they've left for someone else's video, which is to say that if it implies that there is 2 separate reference frames, then you need to really ram that point home. In order for it to demonstrate the Earth turning underneath the fixed frame of the gyro, then you must have a Coriolis effect, and you must have plane travel being vastly reduced if you have the Earth spin coming towards you. That's what it's demonstrating, 2 separate reference frames. So you need to have that sort of in your back pocket at all times. Oh right, so it shows that the gyroscope, the gyroscope spins, light or mechanical, it doesn't make any difference, because some people, for Cult himself, would claim that the mechanical gyros do this as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's where it originally came from, right? For Cult. So ultimately speaking, whoever claims this proof, you must point out that in order for it to be proving that the Earth turns underneath the fixed frame of the gyro, then you've got a Coriolis effect. Why don't the planes take a massively shortened duration when they have Earth turning towards them, if this gyro is turning in a fixed reference with the Earth turning underneath? So that needs to be right there on the tip of your lips if somebody brings this up, because it doesn't prove the Earth spins. That's for certain.
If anything, I think the key point is to remember that regardless of what it may or may not prove, it's important to realise that Bob didn't actually do anything. Bob's words that were in that documentary were cut. There were 2 points. There was one point whilst he was sat on the sofa, and the words that he said whilst he was sat on the sofa, whilst being proper, talking properly on the record, them words are absolutely right. The conversation he had in the background whilst he was in the sandpit or whatever it was, them words were they were taken in a much more relaxed environment where he's being jovial, he's talking off the record, and the other little bit that needed to be on the end was cut. So let's put it all into perspective. The guy didn't get something wrong. Yeah, he did say something a little bit wrong, and I can understand the resentment against it. But let's be clear, though, he didn't do anything. And whatever somebody did definitely didn't prove something. They measured it. And we've been talking about this with the scientific method for weeks. You've got to manipulate that independent variable. So your gyroscope is no different to a tape measure, is no different to a thermometer. They're all measuring devices. And the measuring things that we give them names to, like distance or speed, they're all concepts, right? They're not proving what these things are doing and how they got there. They're just telling us what they did. So the voltmeter, for example, was the one that Bob used. The voltmeter is measuring the amount of current through the wires. But that's not telling you where the current's coming from. It's not telling you how the current got there. You don't know the cause of it. You just know that when you put one side there, the other side on the other side, you get a number. And that's all the gyroscopes are doing. They're measuring something. But they're definitely not proving it. And we know so because the scientific method does tell us you've got to manipulate it to prove it's the cause of the effect that you believe that you're looking at. That's it.
Then before we move forward, we're all doing it, and we're conflating two very different issues here. So I just want to say, well, first of all, the way Bob's been misrepresented with regards to the documentary is fucking shocking. The way the abuse he's getting is fucking shocking. And we're all on his side on that. The second side is the handbags from last week. And putting the handbags aside, which I don't really care about, there is a fantastic debate to be had that we all must have. And I'm prepared. I know John's on tonight, and I can't wait because I want to put my neck on the line and try and have a little stab in the dark. I'm shitting it now, John. I've got to be honest. Even just saying the thought that I'm going to ask you to judge something, but I want to have a little look at what's science, what isn't science with regards to a gyroscope. And in a way, I want to be wrong because it's confusing for us all, this. And we've got to put our pride aside when we're talking amongst ourselves. There's nothing wrong. I don't give a shit if some baller hears it. But if we're talking amongst ourselves, there's nothing wrong with being wrong and learning. I've learned so much from so many people over these years. And I think I just want to differentiate the two. There's the learning side of it, which I'm desperate for Bob to come back in. But I'm also just want to differentiate the fact that we as a family, a flat earth group of people that are all along a certain journey or have a certain level of understanding, one of our own that we may be disagreeing with on a small point right now is getting shat on by everybody, and we need to stand behind him and then tell him we disagree with him on his view with regards to the method. I'm done ranting now. But.
Well, that's a good opportunity for me to pipe up then, because a lot of people have sort of approached me in the respect that, you've been waiting for an opportunity to have a pop at Bob for whatever reason that they envisage or make up. And ultimately speaking, that's not the case. If I wasn't concerned for Bob, I wouldn't have bothered. I'd just use a different person to make the example, when the opportunity arose. Now, unfortunately, and I'm sure John will back me up in a moment, I wasn't told when I was being taught this information, and I'm not in the slightest bit embarrassed to say I've recently learned all of this information from John. Fortunately, John's very good at backing every word with citations, many of them, for me to double check and cross-reference to know what I'm saying is correct. Now that's good for me, but after the fact I was told, you do realise this isn't a single-edged sword, it cuts both ways. if you're going to cut the heads of globe heads, you're going to also be cutting the heads of flat earthers. And I don't know if it's 6 months, it might be 12 months, it may even be longer. But John and I had a discussion about the information that was due to come out on Behind the Curve. And we both said the same thing to each other. This is unfortunate. And again, this is cruel to be kind, but Bob's ignorance has led him to the position he's in, which is useful. Number one, it's useful to show Bob that there is a better way of doing things, but it also highlights to every member of the audience when they next hear somebody on a YouTube video or on mainstream media saying things like, and I'll give you an example I've seen, these tyres are scientifically proven to give you better grip. You'll hear that and go, scientifically proven, independent and dependent variable, hypothesis-driven experimentation. No, just magic words. Magic words that have come to mean, and as Adam rightly pointed out, conflated to mean, I've proven something. So this curtails into the how can I phrase this? The sort of reverse of that in the negative, which is, and again, I'm going to have a pop at somebody, seemingly have a pop at them, even though I don't want that to be the case. It's just necessary to move forward. So Jaron will often say, this is the fault of science or scientists. And it's like, no, this isn't science that's caused this. It's the hijacking of the terminology that's caused this. Science still does exactly what it ever did. It's exactly the same method. It still proves or disproves your scientific prediction. It is still empirical. That's not changed. The change, or the perceived change, has come from people like Brian Cox or Freemason astronauts who tell you from a soundstage that they're doing science when they blow up a balloon or they put a bubble into the air or whatever the hell they claim is science. They're not establishing the cause of an effect. They're not making a scientific prediction and formulating a hypothesis. They're not performing systematic experimentation to establish the cause of the effect. They're not doing any of that. If they were, they'd have something that they could absolutely declare was proof of what they assert. Now, over the however many years this has taken, we've now reached the position where it's so colloquially understood to mean I've proven something that any Joe Blogs can say the word science and have everybody nodding along going, yeah, that means he's proven it. Until some, and I'll say it quite boldly, some asshole like me comes along and says, oh yeah, what was the scientific prediction? Can you give me the null? And they go, what's a null? And in that moment, all the magic, all the luster has gone completely. But in that moment, you realise that you're being brainwashed with this language consistently throughout your entire life. And you've been duped into believing that you live on a rock that's circular or spherical, flying through a vacuum, and lights in the sky are actually gas, defying the second law of thermodynamics, by the means of this magic word of science, or experiment, or hypothesis, or a whole number of scientifically sounding words that instantly mean you've validated a scientific prediction when you use them, because those words have context. It is semantics. Words have meanings.
I think it's worth giving an analogy. Do you all remember when Conspiracy Cats was going up banging on about how seismology proves the shape of the Earth can only be a sphere because he uses a bit of kit? He fires pulses through the ground, a P wave and an S wave. The only way that's possible is if it's, of course, a sphere because of the pattern that they get back. Well, all that does, and we attack this from this angle back then with Conspiracy Cats, but the same principle applies here. All you're doing is using a little bit of tech. You're firing a pulse through the ground, seeing what you get back, and you're interpreting what you see. But you're not proving whatever the cause is, right? Now, obviously, in that instance, there's no cause. It's purely interpretation. But if it was essential that you needed to prove the cause, you couldn't prove the cause of whatever might be there. All he's doing is getting a reflection back with squiggles on paper that he interprets, and he thinks he means something by doing that. Well, our position back then is the same as it is now. All you're doing is using a little bit of technology and you're interpreting something. That's the same with the gyroscopes. A little bit of technology, you're interpreting something.
We've been joined by Slick James Johnson. Say hello, Slick.
Hello, how you guys doing today? Sorry to interrupt.
No, pleasure to have you here. We've also not heard very much from Betty, so I don't know if you want to pipe up Betty and give your 2 pennyworth in, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I'm still here, but I'm listening, so I'm waiting for my chance. Maybe later.
Fair enough.
I've got one little bit there, Nathan, and that regards to the analogy you used when John introduced you this double-edged sword. And double-edged swords are dangerous, but they're also very powerful. And as long as you know there's 2 sides to it, they're an extremely powerful weapon. And for me, the reason I'm here today and the reason I'm behind you and John with this crusade is not for the short term. It's very easy to win some short-term arguments by using the same bullshit and not speaking correctly. But if we do want to win this in the long term, it's important that what we say now is valid and not ridiculable in 2 years' time, because that's the thing. It's about ignoring them and moving forward on our own terms and making sure that our terms are correct, irrespective of what they say. I don't care what they say, but making sure that when we move forward, when we confirm something for ourselves, if we confirm it scientifically, we do confirm it scientifically. But if we confirm it through logic and reason, we state that that's the way in which we've confirmed it, so that we're not held accountable to the obvious and observable things that we state to be then pointed out that they're not scientific and in some way undermined.
Yeah, I just want to give a bit of clarity what I mean by double-edged sword. So in other words, if I'm going to have Brenda on the show and ask her when she uses the word science for her hypothesis, that's very powerful because it shows where it falls apart when she doesn't have one, doesn't understand one, has to look it up, substitutes the independent and dependent variable, all the usual nonsense that people who basically don't understand what science is do after asserting the magic word of science. Well, that's great. I can chop a globehead's head off. Unfortunately, Bob Nodell's got a taste of the other side of the sword, which is to say I've gone, what's your independent or dependent variable? What's your scientific prediction, otherwise known as a hypothesis? And Bob's done the same thing. He's substituted his independent and dependent variable. He doesn't know what a hypothesis is. He's had to look it up after the fact. He's done all the things that I have happen to us when we have globeheads do it. So, yeah, that's no good for Bob. But in time, that can only strengthen his arguments going forward.
Let me just add something as well. I watched a video by Sly Sparkane. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of his more recent ones. And he basically opens up with the comment that basically flat earthers are science deniers. I don't know if you've seen this, this one, guys, but he's claiming that we deny science. Well, actually, when you talk about a double-edged sword, this is the other end of the sword, because he's claiming that we're science deniers. Actually, we're asking for the science. We want to see what causes things. For example, we want to see what causes sunsets. And the claim is that Earth rotation causes it. Well, can we see that science, please? So we're not science deniers. We are literally begging for the science that proves that it's the Earth that's turning that's causing the sunset. Now, we all know that the sunset isn't necessarily consistent with a sphere. Yeah, you can interpret it that way. But if it was consistent with a sphere, shouldn't there be plenty of evidence to support the rotation of the Earth? And there really isn't. Because if there was, there wouldn't even be this discussion. There wouldn't be this grey area. So Sly claims that we're science deniers. We're now beating the drum that we want the science, that Sly ignores, that he thinks that we're all science deniers. But that works both ways. So whilst we can point out that Sly, we actually want the science that you guys can't give us, it works the other way for Bob too. So if Bob claims that there's science, that's when there becomes a discussion, because experiment or science are trigger words in the same way that gravity is, curvature, axial rotation, all the housekeeping points, experiment and science are two key trigger words too. So it works both ways. So if all this body of science is out there telling us that we live on a sphere, it appears to me that the only time that heliocentrism comes into the discussion is when it's pseudoscience. Because when it's the real world science, well, There is no. We all know what the real world looks like. But pseudoscience, the minute you open the door to pseudoscience, that's when thingy comes in. It's heliocentrism. But if you're gonna open the door for pseudoscience for Bob with the gyroscopes, well, you're gonna open the door for the argument for heliocentrism too, and that's the very thing that we've been attacking, because heliocentrism does not exist unless it's pseudoscience. Well, so that's why it's important that we get this bit right.
I want to correct you on that, because that implies that this is like Bob's fault, and it's of no fault of Bob. We are all victims of this, every last one of us. You know, we all went through the same process in school at a relatively young teenage age to be told that science proves things. So you understand it, you've got it, it's ingrained, you know, it's proof. Then you get told about the molten iron core. Flick to page 35 and you'll see the core of the Earth. Right? Nothing but bollocks. In the same breath, almost. In the same classroom. There you go. It's definitely under the same banner. Science class. So if we're all led down this path, and then we're given a dozen different methods that have apparently evolved beyond the dusty old empirical method to mean what I say is proof, then you're all going to do it naturally. Like I say, I've seen YouTube videos where they claim stickiness of tyres is scientifically proven. And you're like, no, it isn't. That's got nothing to do with science. You know, that's trial and error. That's technology. Well, very good, but it doesn't have the same luster when you're trying to flog tyres, or flog ether rotation, or flog earth turn. You know, it just doesn't have the same luster. So this isn't something that Bob is opening the door for. I said this the other day on the debate. Bob is, if you like, 1/1,000,000% of the problem here. The problem is the people who actually have the current narrative, the current rhetoric. Is that Bob and ether turn? No, of course not. What's the current rhetoric? Well, the Earth's turning, right? Yeah, gyroscopes prove it according to Bob. Yeah, that's the current rhetoric. That's the real problem here. Not Bob's assertion on the flat Earth side. That's just a danger we need to avoid going forward, as opposed to making Bob the scapegoat for this problem. Well, this is a global problem, not a Bob problem. The fact that it's been highlighted to him, well, hopefully he'll understand it and move forward, and hopefully the assholes in the chat that start criticising for the bloody money he earns or doesn't earn or doesn't give to Jaren or whatever the hell that is, it's just a bloody outrage. You just think how much, I mean, I know I'm parroting what you guys have already said, but I've enjoyed Globebusters. They've put in absolutely tons of time, effort and work, and this, what we're doing right now, is in support of them. We're not trying to, you know, push them out. Quite the contrary. Yeah, I'm going to try and absorb an audience. That's me as a YouTuber. Not going to deny that. If anybody tries to pin it on me, I'm not going to lie. Yes, I see the opening and the opportunity. However, this might be a very short-lived endeavour if this is the difficult bit, if Bob recognises his error and sees the benefit to pulling apart the current rhetoric, the globe rhetoric, based on the same thing we've pulled apart his rhetoric with. So if that's the case, then Bob will be an asset. Now, I know Anthony doesn't want me to say this, but if that doesn't happen, unfortunately, Bob becomes a danger because he's essentially promoting the ideas that we've been brainwashed and tricked with. And that's something I can't get behind. Sorry, go on, Anthony.
Let me just give a summit in context in support of Bob here. Bob did say numerous times, and Mike did say numerous times on the Globebusters hangout, that they realised that it's not science. They did say that, but what they then did was then spent 2 hours wanking off over gyroscopes. That's not the way to deal with something that's not scientific. The way to deal with something that's not scientific is to say, yeah, we realize that this is not science, but that also means it doesn't prove anything. This is basically a measurement, and it didn't go that way. But everybody then thinks because you spent 2 hours talking about these gyroscopes, that's basically a reification, because you're reifying the thing that you've just denounced. So it's confusing people. What should have been is a kill. It should have been the gyroscopes don't prove what's causing this thing. Yeah, there's 15 degrees of rotation, but we see the stars are rotating, and the fiber optic gyro appears to be doing the job that our eyes do. We can see the stars appear to be turning, but because they don't do what the mechanical gyros do, there's a question mark over why it doesn't. That really is literally the end of the discussion, but that isn't how it went. So for the next 2 hours, whilst it was interesting to watch if you're interested in gyros, let's be honest, everybody is. They're the cool toys or scientific instruments, whatever. But bottom line is, he played that wrong because he should have been killing it at that point. Nathan would have killed it. We would have killed it in the debate. If it don't prove now, so what? It's an affirming the consequent form of logical fallacy, is it not? If P, then Q, Q therefore P. Well, if stars are turning, or if Earth is turning, then we'll see 15 degrees. We do see 15 degrees, therefore Earth must be turning. We would have jumped all over the ballers with that. We'd have stamped on the head with it. But if it doesn't seem to be allowed when it's not against a baller, and it's like, well, why? It's a double-edged sword. If Sly's demanding that ballers that we're like refusing or rejecting science, well, no, actually, we're trying to apply it. But the problem is everybody's got their own understanding of what science is, and it seems to be a very broad, means everything to everybody kind of word or sentence, and it's not like that. It's specific. Words do have meaning, and it doesn't become semantic. It becomes wrong. I'm done.
How's my mic?
If I could get a chance to interject.
Go ahead.
I think what's happened here is just like you said, Nathan, when we go to school, we get filled with knowledge. So what happens is we're filled to the brim with knowledge, and flat earth is new knowledge. So what happens is people like Bob and a lot of other people, they try to add to this knowledge and they're already filled with knowledge. So what has to happen is you first have to empty yourself. You have to empty yourself of all of the knowledge that you have and then start over. Now, once you start empty, now you make an assessment. You look around, what do we have? Okay. I look around, I see an Earth. As far as I can tell, it's flat and motionless. That's all I can see. This is all I know. So I look up in the sky, I see the stars rotating. That's all I know. That's all I can do. So unless there's some observed phenomena that would make me think differently, then that's that. See, I think what happens is with this old way of knowing, this knowledge that was filled into us, we had to know everything. Every single thing must be known. That's why we have the Big Bang Theory, exactly how it happened, when it happened, how the Earth formed, when it formed. See, all of this knowledge, and this knowledge is not known, it's just made up. See, but we're used to this made up knowledge, and what ends up happening is that people come into flat earth on that same level of trying to know everything. And that's what Bob and them have gotten caught up into, trying to know it all. But if you don't have any observed phenomena, then there is nothing to challenge. And if you do have the observed phenomena and you can't vary the variables to, understand it, then you have to let that go. With our new knowledge and emptying ourselves, we have to understand is there are some things that are just not meant to be known.
Yeah, precisely. You've got to vary and manipulate your presumed cause of the effect to prove it causes the effect. It's as simple as that. And if you don't have that, you've only got an observed phenomena. That's it. If you can call it that. If you want to claim that 15-degree deviation is a phenomena, I don't know, John, would you ever? I know you probably would concede it for the sake of argument, like I have done, but it's not an observed phenomena.
I agree.
How's my mic? Nathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, sir.
All right, pal.
Yeah, I got something to say about this. Listen, Bob's a good man. I'm quite confident in saying that there's nobody in the audience or on the panel that has done or sacrificed more for Flat Earth than Bob and Cammie. So let there be no doubts about that, and not lose sight of it. Bob made a mistake. As it turns out, a big mistake. But we all make them. For the mature ones, they recognize it, learn from it, and move on. The peers of those who make mistakes, if mature themselves, will challenge the big mistake head on And if the one making the mistake is unaware of said mistake, he or she will be made aware. Post haste. Reason and acumen will be the tools for the reconciliation, not emotions or alliances or anything else. The one who made the mistake, if challenged or not, will own up to that mistake. The mature peers will recognize this because they have been through this process also. Unless they be hypocrites, will forgive the peer of that mistake in total. And number two, chalk it up as a learning experience, not only for the one who made the mistake, but for everyone, and get back to work. These tenets are what character, moral courage, and intestinal fortitude are made of. Let's get back to work. I'm done.
Very well said. Were those your own words?
Of course.
Well said, pal.
Superb. Very well said. Absolutely.
John, that's how we operate in the medical industry. It's the only way to operate efficiently when things matter.
So what's this useful for? So let's say tomorrow Bob recognises precisely the error that he has made and the path that it's led him down in order for a TV company to take a little excerpt, this looks bad for flat Earth, and then hype that up into scientific validity of Earth spin. Well, what's the use of this? What can it benefit to average Joe watching right now? Wow, 391 people, almost 400 people watching. So let's pick on somebody different. And Anthony's already selected him for me, so well done, Anthony. Sly Sparkane. Now, big shout out to Phuket Word, who, I'm going to have a slight word with in the vein that John's just put out there, which is to say that, he said in order for Sly Sparkane's observation of these pipes, so I'll give you a bit of background in a moment, but the observation of these pipes to be scientifically valid, he'd need to get the side profile view. And I started tutting, tut. But no, big shout out to Phuket Word. Go and check him out. But he's pulled apart the lack of scientific validity in terms of Sly Sparkane's observation that he's planning. So he's raised about $3,500 to buy a P1000, and he's graciously said, I don't need this camera after the observation. I'll give it away to one of the people who've contributed, which is very good. However, he started his video by saying, these science deniers. So he's already prefaced his video by making it clear that this is a scientific video. So it's going to lend some scientific validity. Oh dear. Let's not worry about Bob anymore, because there's a new cowboy in town, Sly Sparkane. He thinks he's got some science. He even, very foolishly, puts the card up that says, let's experiment. Oh, wonderful. So we're doing hypothesis tests, are we, Sly? Marvellous. Well, I've got 388 people listening to this right now that are going to be asking you for your hypothesis. Because what's an experiment, Sly? Well, it's a hypothesis test, obviously. And what's a hypothesis? Well, it establishes the cause of an effect. So, I'd like your hypothesis, Sly. And I'm sure there's quite a lot of other people out there that would also like your hypothesis, especially the people who've potentially given you money thinking you're doing science. Now, that would be the thing that I would definitely find useful if I was looking at Sly going, I wonder if what he's doing, I wonder if his method's valid. Well, he's made it clear what method he's using. He's using the scientific method. So he will have a hypothesis. He's made it clear he's doing science, hasn't he? He's got an experiment. So, let's ask Sly. Hi, Sly. What's your hypothesis? Maybe you can give us the constituent parts, namely the observed phenomena. Yeah? So, the phenomenon that you are actually looking at in this example, and how it occurs in the physical and natural world. Now, it might be the case that Sly can say, no, I'm replicating this observed phenomena, so therefore valid. And then we'd need to know the other constituent part, wouldn't we? The thing he's going to vary and manipulate to cause the phenomena. So, I'd like that. I'd like to put it out there right now. I'd like to know what Sly's independent variable is the thing he will vary and manipulate to cause the effect, and his dependent variable, his observed phenomena. I'd like to know what those things are, given that Sly is doing a crowd-funded experiment. Now, the consequences, let's make these dire things also very clear for Sly, because if it's the case that Sly has raised funds under a banner of science claiming to do experiments, then he is a scientific fraud, a practitioner of pseudoscience. So I think it's pretty clear that we must get the scientific prediction from Sly double quick pronto, because obviously, given that someone of such notoriety as Bob Nodell has fallen victim to this, it would only be reasonable that Sly comes under the exact same scrutiny. So, just to summarise, anybody who feels so inclined, or absolutely without question, if you have contributed to Sly's experiment, then ask him for his scientific prediction, also known as a hypothesis, specifically the independent variable and the dependent variable. I look forward to finding out precisely what those are.
Well said. That's it. We want to hear it. Give it to us now.
I'm sure we'll find out. Wow, 400 people watching. Massive shout out to everybody who shared. Really, really appreciate it. So yeah, I'm sure there's going to be quite a few people asking Sly Sparkane for his independent and dependent variable, John.
He doesn't know what those are. He came on the show before with his other hypothesis. He didn't even know what a hypothesis was, or an experiment, or the things that make up said experiment. So we've already been down this road. It's just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Now, he has raised money. That's a new player. Like you said, show us the scientific evidence. Give us the observed phenomenon, which is 50% of the hypothesis. It is your dependent variable, right? Give us the independent variable. Then let's see the experiment. Now, you did this with the banner of science and you collected this money, right? What happens if it's not science? Is it fraud? I'll let you answer that. Thanks.
I think we have to remember that Sly has called us science deniers. So if he's going to claim that he's doing science, and we ask, how did you comply with the scientific method? What was your observed phenomena? What's he going to say for that? Is he going to say, water appears to bend? If we say to him, what was your independent variable? What did you manipulate to prove the cause of an effect relationship? What's he going to do?
Let's not guess.
There isn't one, is there? All he's going to do is fill it up with water, observe, and then record his results. Well, how's that any different to seismic waves, P waves and S waves, and conspiracy cats claiming that they prove sphere? None. You're observing something and you're interpreting what you see. In the same way that the gyroscopes, you observe something and you interpret what you see. But none of them are proving a cause. So if the cause is something to do with water in pipes, that would be a phenomena. You're going to manipulate something to do with it. But if you're not doing science, in this case, Sly is not doing science, it's a valid question. Well, what is he doing? And he's simply doing an observation. Falls outside of science, though, because there's no cause and effect relationship. Yet we're the science deniers, and he's preaching that he's doing science. I say, no, you're not doing science. You're making a measurement. Interesting as it may be, and I'm sure the results will always be on Sly's magical interpretation somehow. But point is, he's not actually doing science, the very thing that he criticizes us for. So on the one hand, it works against Bob. Equally, it works against conspiracy cats, and it equally works against Sly Sparkane. So although it seems like Bob's getting a lot of flack at the moment, sure, some of the flack is warranted. The rest of the stuff about what was said and all that kind of stuff, we're not really bothered about. But what we are bothered about is what science is there. Because if the gyros are showing 15 degrees of optical revolutions per hour, no, 15 degrees per hour of movement, then we want to know what's causing that. But we realize that a gyroscope's not doing it. So just to be really clear, Bob did denounce that these gyroscopes were not science on the show. Let's just make that really, really clear. But he then spent 2 hours basically chatting about them. Well, that kind of reifies the non-science that you've just denounced.
Well, there has been a glimmer of hope in this regard, though, hasn't there, Anthony? So you've been filling me in second-hand about your discussions, and from what I can glean, it seems like, at the very least, they're trying to go through after the fact. I'll stay my disappointment. They're trying to fit the gyroscope into the scientific method, which tells me that even though they're sort of bracing against me, like it's my method, that they're actually recognising that there must be some adherence or some semblance of adherence to this method. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going out of their way to find this French document you told me about, right? I lost everybody.
I'm still here.
I got an issue with my hangout. Bear with me a second, Slick.
Hello, Nathan.
Sure.
Anthony just gone silent. Have I said something I
No,
shouldn't?
I was on mute. I was on mute. I think someone sent it to them after the event, but the point is, though, like, if he's only just now considering it, which is what he seems to be, very demanding that it is included in, it is scientific because it does prove something. Well, whatever it proves, it's the thing that he manipulates in the experiment that he claims. So whatever that thing was, it's going to be either speed of spinning disk or angle of mirror or something else. So whatever that thing that he varies, that's the presumed cause. So unless the thing that he varies is the ether or whatever it is that he's claiming to prove, then that's not going to be science because it's not going to adhere to the scientific method.
Well, one thing that I can still see that's not correct is that you're trying to find and invent phenomena to go along with the gyroscope. See, so really right off the bat, if you're trying to find a way to insert a situation just so that you can conduct science, well, then you're kind of already behind. You have to start with observing something first. So you can't just say, well, I got a gyroscope, so I'm going to search for rotation somewhere. Why? Why would anybody do that? And the reason is because we have been brought up in a observe and declare reality. See, so this scientific method thing is not something that's really widespread. Everybody has been observing and declaring for eons. How do you think we got the Big Bang Theory? The only way you can have a Big Bang Theory is to observe and declare. Now, if most of the population goes by the Big Bang Theory, that means that everyone is under the understanding that you observe and you declare. And unless you break from that reality, which isn't a reality, you'll always just keep going in the same circles. You have to empty yourself and start from new, start fresh. What do I have? What do I observe? Do I see anything out of the ordinary? You know, just like the thing with gravity. You know, they say this thing with a downward force. There is no downward force. If you take a 3-year-old child and that child picks up a toy and it drops it, that child isn't amazed, thinking like, wow, what was that? What was that force that pulled that back to the ground? No. What happened was it's just a natural phenomena. When you pick something up that comes from the earth, when you let it go, it goes back to the earth. It's not down. It has nothing to do with down. See, so there's no way to scientifically verify gravity, so they made it up. They observed a phenomena and caught, which wasn't even a phenomena, put a name on it, and then declared that that was science. And this is the world that 95% of the population is stuck in. So when people come along like Nathan and John and other people that try to make people understand what the real scientific method is, they can't get over that old mentality. That has to be thrown out. You got to get rid of that. You got to empty yourself before you can pour new knowledge into yourself. Thank you.
Can I stick my neck on the line here then?
Hold on 1 second. I got something to say about that. Even with the Big Bang fiasco, it's not observe and declare with that. It's just declare. Now, if you could show me or give me the make, model, and serial number of the time machine they used and they used to observe this, then it's just a declaration conjured from vapor, right?
Exactly.
In this particular case.
Oh, but hold on. They can see back in time because of the distance they can see through their telescope when they leave it on a long exposure. Don't you know anything about astronomy?
Yeah, I know it's pseudoscience.
Right. We'll get to that. Go ahead, Adam.
It's with regards to that, and and you'll have to bear with me because I've not written this down anywhere. I've just had this thing from chatting from Friday with the boys, and I've got an analogy I want to do, which kind of uses the gyroscope to explain when it's science and when it isn't.
Okay, can I stop? I want to stop him right there because I do. Just collect yourself because I got an algorithm for you, and it's real easy. Well, now we've been talking about this in the back channels for a long time. I never really came out and said it. I just assumed that everyone knew this. So this is a really short algorithm. You ready?
Right.
Is the inquiry A, cause and effect question, or B, a what is question?
Exactly. And that's the premise of what I want to test with you, John.
Because if it's B, then it isn't a valid scientific inquiry.
No.
You follow me?
Exactly. And this is why I'm prepared. That's what I'm saying. I'm sticking my neck on the line because it's only in my head. So be gentle with me.
Oh, I'm going to be gentle. I'm just asking you a question. You can answer yes or no to right now. Is it A, a cause and effect question, or B, a what is?
It's an A. And then
I think you should let Adam speak for a little bit. You know. Go ahead, Adam. Say what you're saying.
Okay, so
Ranty pipes it with his handbag in his hand. I love it. Is this going to be the start of chaos? We shall find out. It's only science, lads. Take a breath.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll let Adam speak. Go ahead, Adam.
I'm ready for you to savage me.
Let me in the past hour, but go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, go on. Tell me. And I do want you to savage me, but I'm trying to put an analogy in my head where I can use the gyroscope in a scientific way and also demonstrate how it's being used in the debate. So if I take my gyroscope and I want to use it for something, if I build a roundabout, start to spin it, and I put my gyroscope on there when it's static, and when I spin the gyroscope, the roundabout, I notice that the gyroscope reorientates itself. And then I'd set up an experiment where I hypothesize that the rate of movement of the gyroscope will be dependent upon the rate of spin of the turntable. And I define that scientifically. To me, that seems a reasonable step of using science to determine that rate of rotation affects the applied force and therefore the reaction of the gyroscope. That's the first point. And before you savage that, just in case, let me expand on it a little bit. So with that in mind, that then gives me a meter, a slight force meter, which gives me an indication of something that I could then use moving forward. So if I took it and put it on a bigger roundabout and I noted the rate of change of movement, even though it was on a bigger roundabout, I could use mathematics to using the original science from my first experiment, that I could then calculate the force that was being applied on the bigger roundabout. So therefore use the gyroscope as a meter, a bit like a thermometer, something that is quantifiable in the real world. And if that mathematics and science matched up, I could use it as a meter. And that'd be really useful for lots of other roundabouts that I observe spinning. Take it and stick it on that roundabout and go, well, this roundabout's this big. What I then can't do to make any scientific statement is take that gyroscope and put it on the Earth and say, oh, look, shows the Earth's not rotating. In no way have I manipulated my independent variable. But with logic and reason, I could draw my own conclusions from my observations. I'm done, John. Kill me.
Now we got to check with Ranty. Can I speak now?
Oh, come on, give him a break. I would have told you to shut up eventually, John.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I'm big enough and ugly enough for me and John's known each other long enough to not need defending.
There you go, John. Ranty's giving you permission. You're all good.
I'll allow you.
Thank you. Yeah, too funny. Good one, Adam. I give you an A for effort and F for judgment. What I want to hear is, what was the natural phenomena observed?
Yep.
Yeah, and then this, and I do know this because obviously, and this is the subtle nuance that I really wanted to get to maybe later on, you bugger. Which is the fact that when we talk about the natural observed phenomena, it is still being conjured up in an apparatus with regards, but it's being used as a meter, and it's that bit I wanted to gauge, because there is a point where you can use a piece of technology to give you a reading, and as long as you see, the science comes in the calibration of the device. When you then use it afterwards to make the scientific statement that if you apply a force as demonstrated in the experiment of different rotation speeds, right, that an effect occurs. There's the science for me. That's the experiment. That's the science. If I spin the turntable, the gyroscope will respond. And I appreciate that the response is within a man-made thing. And that was the bit I wanted you to get to eventually. But it was more the difference of where you then apply it to test it scientifically to generate a meter, and then the statements you can then apply to the use of that meter. I was initially getting to. Does that make sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I would be a hypocrite if I wasn't, or if I didn't screen share and then have you perform the same as.
Oh, come on! Oh, before you do that, John. So I'm going to fill the audience in, right?
Okay.
What Adam's now doing is he's basically he's like a guy that knows he's a patsy. Yeah, he knows he's a scapegoat, rather. You know, probably a similar thing. And because he's being wheeled to be set on fire, he's got his balls out and he's waving them at you. Right? He's giving you everything you need for you to dissect that into little pieces. But what I'm not going to let you do is humiliate him in the same way you do the ballers and write down his independent and dependent variable for the audience.
No, absolutely fine. I think that's a very sensible way of doing it.
Oh, okay.
I think it exemplifies the points, but go through the points and the subtle points that I've talked about, because for me, that will be very, very useful. Look, I hold my hands up here. John, a year or more ago, helped me go back to school and remember what I was taught. Now, I've still got programming to work through. And if there's something I can learn, I'm not asked. Like I said, in the medical world, you hold your hands up when you're wrong, because otherwise people fucking die. You're not allowed ego. You have to put your hands up. So, as I said at the beginning, I was putting my neck on the line. John, beast me, baby.
And
do it the proper way.
And Adam and I had talked previously, not about this situation, but we have talked previously. And I know he comes from academia. I knew it the first 3 sentences out of his mouth. I knew it. Anyone who's been to university knows if they hear somebody talk, they know that this person has been to university and has been educated or not. Just to let you all know. So I knew Adam would be amenable to this. That's why I said, lest I be a hypocrite, because we put these people, the Baltards, through the gauntlet, right? I knew he'd be amenable to this, so I'll go ahead and screen share. Nathan, you got me?
Get me that pink writing up right now.
Tell me when it's up.
Yeah, the audience has got you.
So to provide scientific evidence, right, you must provide it. We're dealing with natural science, correct?
Yep.
This isn't computer science. It's not economics. It's not social sciences. This is natural science. Therefore, the phenomena is naturally observed. So, see, this is where it's going to begin and end, correct?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to need to add to my statements then to define it as a more natural phenomena. And that's where, when I said talking about scientifically validating the gyroscope as a meter, so the natural phenomena I would say is when I go on and sit on a roundabout, I feel like I'm being pushed backwards. Yeah. Yeah. Or when
hold on. Hold on. Just between the two of you, John, I would definitely want to hear the whole nonsense formulated, if you don't mind.
I've not finished. I've got a couple for you to destroy. When I observe a sycamore seed fall from the ground,
Say that one more time.
When I observe a sycamore seed fall
Is that
from
the
ground,
hypothesis?
Wait a second.
No, this is my natural. This is my. Are you ready?
Yeah,
I
sycamore.
told you I hadn't written this down.
Is that
Adam,
with the
you're doing
genre?
good.
Maybe I should just take the early beating.
No, Adam,
there
you
is-
were doing good until he said that sycamore seeds fell from the ground.
Fell to the ground.
From
Sorry. Yeah.
Ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Come on, you
I'm
bunch
sorry.
of ballers.
Semantics. Huh?
Yeah.
Right, let's try that again.
Words mean things.
Right, so who's going to summarize what the problem is here?
You can't make the natural phenomena work, right?
Right.
Well, there's
I think that's the first thing. I cannot not say what the observed natural phenomena is to begin with.
Right, because the alternative, like I said, this is key. The first step is key because it's going to give you a whole 50% of your hypothesis, right? Because the observed natural phenomena is your dependent variable. So you got to know that. And
Okay, can I sit on a roundabout then and say I feel myself sliding outwards?
Nathan's.
Or can I say, can I have a roundabout? Just give me a roundabout.
He's keen. He's
I'll
keen.
give you the roundabout. And I can't do this because I'm looking at my screen here over to the right, and Nathan is laughing. I can't do this because I'm laughing.
But a roundabout is not a natural phenomenon.
Okay, let's give it to him
That's
anyway.
why I was trying to think of something.
Here we go. We've got
would
progress.
Generate the force.
We've got
that I'm
progress,
trying to
Adam.
describe
He's going
in
to
the
write it
natural
down for you.
phenomena.
He's keen. He's keen. He's like a baller. You know
I
what?
know.
While
I'm doing
John's
my
writing
best
this,
here.
while John's writing this down, one of the ballers told us the other day that it's just tremendously good fun to troll flat earthers, and it's when we're really determined and keen and super serious and trying to do this. And in this moment, I've realised what they mean, because Adam's full on. He's in character. He's got the bullshit flowing. He's interrupting. It's going really well.
I'm not
Adam.
conceding shit till the end. I'm telling you now.
You're not conceding anything. Right, we've got somewhere. Right. Observe phenomena. Who's going to read it out?
Okay, we got the roundabout. All right, I need the hypothesis.
No, not with that.
No muttering.
There's no muttering here.
See, I can't have that. I can't have that.
You can't have that.
I can't have that as my natural.
Yeah, well,
I
give it to
can't
us
work.
now, please.
I can't
Give it to
work
us.
with that.
You can't have that hypothesis, can you?
Even with you graciously allowing me a level of bullshit, I can't progress from that point, John. So, it's going to get harder, isn't it? Okay.
Can you go back to your sycamore?
The observed phenomena is upon me and my wife holding hands and spinning together, which is more than natural. We're married, right?
What's causing the spinning?
We
There you go.
the bed.
So is
Oh,
this a dead end, Adam? I mean,
give up already.
Yeah. I mean, if this was a ball tard, what we'd probably have is them semi-formulate this in advance so we could lead them into their nonsense. And sometimes they're so committed to their nonsense that they will start trying to give us the alternate hypothesis, and it gets very funny. But yeah, it fails at the first hurdle. we haven't got a natural phenomena to observe, right? That's the point here. So roundabouts, what? Where? Take me to your naturally occurring roundabout, Adam.
Okay. Give me this then, just for the point of taking it through, really for the other points that I wanted to look at, so that we all know what we're talking about, the experience felt, the push you get on the roundabout when you spin and you're on it, or when you observe an object that's on the perimeter, what happens to it, if it's the force that's applied to it, if it's free on there. So if we're trying to, in some way, if we could put that into a natural phenomenon, could we then move forward?
Yeah, remember the first question that I asked you, right? Is your inquiry whether somebody's making a claim or whether it's you that's telling yourself, okay, did I just observe a natural phenomenon? That should be really the first question, because that ends it all. The question is it a cause and effect or a what is question? It's really important to identify it there, and you can just nip it in the bud, because if it goes the A route, the cause and effect, then it's available for scientific inquiry at that point, because it could go downhill from there too. After an observed phenomenon, let's say a supernova explosion, that's an observed phenomenon, right? Well, what caused that, right? What's your independent variable? Now, your independent variable needs to be varied and manipulated by the researcher, so you're screwed. That's why astronomy and astrophysics and cosmology are pretender clowns, right? Because what they do is they observe phenomena and then provide a just so story, and they call it science, right? But that's not science, because science is the scientific method, right? There is no get out of incoherent jail free cards. You either follow the method or you don't. If you don't, then it's not science, period.
Could we just elaborate on the reasons why we're going through this? It's essentially because the elites and our people that are in the control of what, that tell us what to do, where we go, what we're taught in schools, all this, we are told that scientific proof has proved the shape of the earth, yeah? And this is the whole thing, that the scientific method cannot prove the shape of the earth, full stop.
Correct.
Absolutely spot on, Ranty.
This is the whole point. This is the whole point of it. No scientific proof for gravity, no scientific proof for earth spin, no scientific proof for axial tilt. We can go on, gas pressure without a container. Literally, there is no, even though we are told there is scientific proof for this, there is no scientific proof for this, or no experiment that could prove it. And that's
exactly. That's the point. Exactly. You got it.
Yeah, the bigger point as well is going bigger than that, going out a bit. If we allow pseudoscience in, the only way that heliocentrism exists is when we let pseudoscience be treated as science. The bigger picture is that the word science is being raped by pseudoscience, and we can't let that happen. It has been happening, but we need to realize and point out and stop it, because if it's pseudoscience, that's where heliocentrism comes in. Without pseudoscience, there is no heliocentrism. So that's why we need to literally point this out and stamp our feet and say, this is not science. There's no manipulation of the independent variable, guys. And that's not just on the gyroscope's point. It's on all the things that they claim. So when boats are going over the horizon, right, you could probably claim to do an experiment that you'd have a boat keep going over the horizon. But if the cause is the boat disappearing over the horizon is really the curvature, unfortunately, to prove that it is actually the curvature, you've got to manipulate that curvature to prove that it is the thing that you see. Otherwise, you've just got a little bit of dirty air. And we all know what that means. So that's why science can't prove the shape of the Earth, or that we're spinning, or that we're orbiting, because you can't manipulate any of these things. But obviously the baller trolls don't realize this, or do realize it and hide it at all costs. So it's basically about raising the awareness for our side to stand up and say, look, this is not science, this is bullshit. And pseudoscience is the mistaken belief that some process or some thing has happened based on the scientific method. And if it's not based on the scientific method, it's pseudoscience. That's why we need to tell everybody.
Whirlpools. They're natural.
Okay, whirlpools what?
Right.
Whirlpools.
Within my naturally observed phenomena, right, I noticed that within a whirlpool, the flow of water outside of the main whirlpool appears to occur at a perpendicular to the circumference of the whirlpool. And that's my natural phenomena that I've observed. And I'm wondering why the water flies off at a right angle.
Whirlpool.
Are we getting better, John? Is that better?
Yeah, I like it.
It's a good demonstration of being a very slick baller, better than most, Adam.
I like it. I like it. So now, did we ask the question first? Remember the question. Is this question a cause and effect question, or is this question a what is question?
Oh, you've ruined it now again, haven't you? Because to use that, that hurts. John, you're naughty.
I'm sorry, Adam.
Well, I want to bring this back on track by saying that there's a very strict point in terms of who's making the claim. So, what's led me to this path is because of people on the heliocentric side saying, bold as brass, that the body of science proves we're on a spinning sphere. Well, that's why I end up on the debate challenging people to provide their scientific evidence. And this is kind of, as a side note, there's been people in the chat that see people making a claim and then ask them for their independent variable. And it's like, no, you're off the mark a little bit, because you've actually got to wait for them to claim science before you start asking them for their hypothesis or independent variable or anything of that nature. But again, to come back on track, Jose recently on the debate was asking me for my alternative to, I think it was the curve calculator. So the begging the question, proof of nothing perspective hijacking curve calculator, which assumes the R value to get you to be on a sphere regardless of the outcome of the calculation. Well, in that instance, he's got a methodology, something seeming scientific-y, that gives him a quote-unquote prediction for what he'll see on a given day. Now, it's not a scientific prediction, it's a bloody Mystic Meg begging the question prediction. So he wants me to give him an alternative. And the reply he gets is, well, sod off. I don't have to give you anything. I can just rip the rhetoric to pieces for its lack of consistency with the scientific method, if it's claiming science. So you end up with a position where if there's enough Jose's out there saying, well, what's your alternative? You get into a trap. The trap that Bob
Bastard, I can do it, Nathan. I can do it if I take the gyroscope out.
Okay. I know you're keen.
So that's no good. That's no good. Damn, sorry. I'll shut up.
I see how the rumpusing settles into. This has been a very telling exercise.
It's so much fun.
So, ultimately speaking, you're then left in a situation where someone like Jose asks you what's your alternative, and you try and find one. So you go out and you fall into the same mistakes as the current practitioners of pseudoscience, which is declare that you're proving things, when in actuality there isn't, in my opinion, any necessity when dealing with the current situation, that being the overriding people's belief that we're on a sphere. Let's not forget that. Well, when you're dealing with that, there will be assertions that have made from science, in quotes, that are actually pseudoscience. So this is the main point. And yeah, unfortunately, there's going to be people who, out of the goodness of their heart, are trying to answer people like Jose and offer them an alternative. And that's a dangerous path to try and tread. And it's the kind path, right? It's the good path. It's the path of the man that's not like me and says, screw you, I don't have to give you a damn thing to pull down my pants and poo all over your religion. Yeah, that's me. Bob, on the other hand, is like, yeah, man, this is devastating for a lot of people. They need answers. Let's try and find them for them. And then, like I say, an asshole like me comes along and says, well, unfortunately, you two have fallen victim to this deception by non-adherence of the scientific method. So that's where you end up with people like Bob and myself falling out, and tears and grief and stress and heartache and lost nights of sleep, which is what Bob and myself have gone through, because I don't want to be fighting with Bob, a good man doing a lot for Flat Earth, when all he's trying to do, unlike me, is actually provide some answers for the Joses of the world who say, what's your alternative? Now, if we do that, we have to be very careful. It's not as easy as to just use the current methodology of deception and magic by asserting science when you have none. That's unfortunate, but Bob's going to just be that lesson. Not a poster child for heliocentricity because of Netflix, not a poster child for flat earthers not being scientific, but a lesson to everybody. Like John said earlier in his excellent speech, that was exactly the motivation, to support people like Bob, the kind people. And, you know, I can say Bob's a good man. Therefore, this should serve as a lesson for the Sly Sparkanes going forward when we ask them for a hypothesis, not to crucify people who've made that mistake because they're on a road to trying to answer questions that we're left with when we figure out that we've been lied to on a massive scale. The heliocentric world is the biggest deception mankind has ever had put upon them. And when you realise that, you're going to have an absolute load of questions about the world you actually live in. And not for the fact that Bob's actually trying, we'd get nowhere. But I personally, now that's not the same road as Bob, so Bob out of the way now, aside from Bob, I see it as far more important personally to only highlight the current deception till people implicitly understand. Well said, Nathan, from Colin Turner. Thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate your support. So I see it as more important, given only that 99% of the Western world think they're on a sphere in a vacuum, that we focus on undoing that magic currently being used by the real guilty parties of it. The Brian Cox, the Neil deGrasse Tyson, the people who will say in the same breath, science is true whether you like it or not, absolutely correct, and then tell you what a bloody light in the sky is. So that's what we need to focus on. And ultimately speaking, is what the Globebusters team have focused on with exceptional effect for a number of years. We should all be praising them. And you see the bloody people that are taking chunks out of their necks in the chat. And it's like, oh, well, Nathan's having a pop, so I will too. It's like, no. Yeah, I'm approaching Bob, which isn't something I wanted to do, about a very tentative subject so that we can progress and have a positive outcome. Not so we can all have a bloody great pop at Bob Nodell, kick him while he's down. Like, Jesus, what's wrong with people?
I agree. And that alternative explanation, that's just a subtle shifting the burden of proof. Number one, right? And it gets people off their guard. And number two, the person that's wanting the alternate explanation is already assuming that his explanation is true, right? So I have my explanation. What's your explanation? And lest we not forget, the most common error in the scientific method is to provide an explanation without a hypothesis and experimental validation. Anyone could give an explanation. I could walk up to a village idiot, right? I could say, give me your explanation. He's going to give me an explanation. How are we judging the explanation? What, on his credentials? On, I don't know, his hair length? No, we don't need an explanation. We need the hypothesis and the experimental validation of that explanation. That's it.
Well, when you say explanation, to be more critical, this is a first. What you actually mean is scientific prediction. So what you're calling explanation is an explanation but with a presumption. So in other words, a hypothesis proves nothing. It is your presumed cause and effect, and what will happen if you've got it right. You presume something causes something else to happen, you vary it and manipulate it, and if nothing happens, you've got a null result. You know, the complete opposite of what the positive result would be if you varied it and it did cause the effect. So it's not an explanation, but often people will give you this mystic Meg prediction, non-scientific hypothesis, and then say that's an explanation for something. And you're like, well, actually scientific predictions would give you a methodology going forward. And that methodology is the whole basis of science. It's based on experiments. That's what science depends on. Validating your hypothesis, validating your scientific prediction. And the end, the validation, it's not an explanation. It's a cause. Here's my cause. That's it, right? There's no long-winded 5-page explanation. It's just, here's the cause, validated by experiment.
Very well said.
Stuff.
So are you trying to say that there's no scientific proof for Earth curve, Nathan?
What? Maybe you'd like to ask the question you asked to Adam, John. Or I'll do it. There's a long pause. What type of question is that, Ranty? What type of question are you asking?
I'm asking a question in regards to tackling the claims of the globe, which there is scientific proof for Earth curve.
I'll give it more specifically. Is it a cause and effect question, or is it a what is question?
The what is.
So it immediately falls outside of science.
Yep.
Simple as that.
So next time, some Muppet comes along and says, science has proven that the Earth is a sphere, you can laugh in their face. There is no scientific validation to Earth being a sphere, and it is absolutely not an axiom we can start with. The axiom I say about 1,000 times on the debates. This, actually, Slick, you said this almost, I'm going to say better than I did. I don't know if you remember the phraseology for what I'm about to say or where I'm going with what I'm about to say. If you do, just say it. If not, I'll lead you a bit more.
A little bit more.
So I would say on the debates that the Earth is obviously and observably flat. You just phrased that slightly differently.
Yes, I would say that the Earth presents itself as flat and motionless. In other words, that's what we experience. That's the beginning point. That's the starting point. And the only thing that could change that or cause us to do any type of inquiry is to observe a phenomenon that would give us reason to question that. And now when I look out, I don't see any phenomena that would give me any cause to question that.
Well said. And what we get charged with as a phenomena, again in the hijacking of science, is concrete nouns. The observably obvious. Let me think of an example. Oh, lighthouses that shouldn't be there if you believe you're on a reification of a globe model. In other words, as a flat earther, we look on a clear day and see a lighthouse 31 miles away. What do we say? We say, lighthouse. Distance, 31 miles. That's it. That's the end of the explanation. It requires no explanation. It's a concrete noun. There's a lighthouse, I can see it. End of story. Now, if you're a globe head, suddenly you have a phenomena. What kind of phenomena? Well, if I beg the question and assume I am on a sphere model, then that said sphere model says and tells me, because it's magic, that we should not see this lighthouse. So, that lighthouse is a phenomena. It's actually a slightly looming non-standard refraction hyena holographic projection of the lighthouse from beyond the Earth curve that we never see, cannot measure, and never experience, because the Earth is obviously and observably flat. But for the fact that I've reified a model and assumed it has a radius value. So therefore we've got a phenomena on our hands. So, let's start varying, manipulating causes and effects. No. Let's start assuming that we have something called terrestrial refraction, also based on the original reification of said sphere model based on a radius value, and we will arbitrarily assign some mathematics to explain why we see a lighthouse that the model originally said we can't see. Magic, isn't it? Or total bollocks asserted under the banner of science, with phenomena and all sorts of other sciencey sounding terms to make you believe you live on a bloody model. And we don't live on a model, as Slit correctly pointed out. The Earth presents itself as motionless and stationary.
Boom.
And
Nathan,
there's another thing too that I'm sorry. There's another thing that that you'll always hear is that this can't happen on a flat Earth. Am I coming in clear?
Oh yeah.
Okay. You'll hear that this can't happen on a flat Earth. And the first question I would ask is, okay, did you observe it on a flat Earth to come up with that declaration? So you can't say what can't happen on a flat Earth unless you have made an observation on a flat Earth. That's
Absolutely. I try and explain that in terms of their mathematics. Their original axiom, to beg the question and insert R, is a flat plane.
Yeah.
Just so I can come back as myself instead of this sniveling thing trying to get out of a pit.
Is this going to be whirlpools again?
No, I want to end. I just want to say, actually, if nothing there, I love science. Okay, and I understand why science had the validity we all give it. Okay, because as you can see tonight, it's a very, 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 very narrow definition that has been over time philosophically worked out to ensure that it is so precise in ensuring the cause and effect, which is its whole purpose. And that's the reason why it's been given in society today. That word has been given that validity because it has such a narrow definition. And in such a narrow definition gives you such a surety when you use the word science. And that was fun, guys, but I'm done with that. Yeah. Gyroscopes don't prove diddly.
Yeah, hopefully that will draw a line under that particular topic, depending on whether or not this ends up being a pilot that dies on its ass or goes forward in future. I don't know about you guys.
I don't care. I'm not doing it again.
Oh, no, you played a great Poe. You were a good Poe. No, you were.
That's his last time.
I don't want to get a big consensus on this. Would anybody disagree if I said that that was the best attempt to formulate it into the scientific method so far?
Most honest attempt.
Well, you
I
came
agree.
up with a almost close to, well, you could definitely call what you had a phenomena. It wasn't ether rotation or stars turning or Earth turning, but whirlpools.
No,
but you know,
I could get it scientific, but I couldn't. I could get it to there, but then I had to lose the gyroscope to continue along the scientific vein. I had to bin the gyroscope. Yeah, otherwise it was useless in terms of
in the gyroscope. What are you talking about? If that had gone to its conclusion, we'd have been figuring out the cause of whirlpools.
Yeah.
What use is that?
We
figured the cause
to proceed in any scientific manner. I had to completely abandon the hope of crowbarring a gyroscope into it, and therefore that was it. I spent about 20 minutes formulating stuff, realizing every time you reformulated it, it completely bastardized the whole thing and ended up having nothing to do with the original concept you were trying to prove. So
pretty much the same as the starting point, in my opinion. But
yeah, I gave it a go for us.
Exactly, and I did want to leave something just so there's no confusion when I stated the algorithm. You know, A, is it a cause and effect, or B, is it a what is? I don't mean to punk out what is questions. I'm just saying that they're not scientific. Doesn't mean those B questions can't be proved, right? Does everyone follow that?
Yes.
I get it.
So don't misconstrue what I was trying to do there. Things can be proved. It doesn't have to be scientific. What we're concerned with is people saying science, the scientific method, and experiment to grease the skids for their claims. Because I've been doing this for about 3 years. I've heard literally thousands of times that in order to believe in the flat earth, I must deny all of physics or science, right? We've all been confronted with this, correct?
Yep.
This is the reason why we say, well, okay, give us the scientific evidence to support that claim. And that's where the whole fairy tale unwinds. The house of cards goes bye-bye. So that's the reason why we do it. Thanks. That's
but they try to trap us now by telling us, well, give me the scientific evidence for the container. That's what they're trying to do now.
Yeah, no,
But that's not the same sort of question.
Well, exactly.
It's the same, isn't it?
Well, it's back to who's making the claim.
For a gas pressure in a container, but not in relation to the Earth.
With gas pressure, it's a necessary antecedent. So when people ask you for your scientific evidence, it's like, well, I don't need to scientifically validate something that is the necessary antecedent. So the other day we had Rumpus on, and Rumpus basically said, well, I've got a gas pressure gradient. And I said, well, what's pressure? And he said, the force over an area. It's like, well, that's it. End of debate. Dead. Killed. Because what area? What are you pressing on if you're going into a vacuum? Well, you're not. You're dispersing into it. Second law of thermodynamics. So you must have the necessary antecedent for the gas pressure. And now this is much to the sleepless nights and detriment of conspiracy cats, right? Because he's come out and backed this in every instance because he's apparently an educator in that regard. So an acclaimed man of science, and according to conspiracy cats, without the container there can be no pressure. So to quote conspiracy cats in this instance, he's correct. Without the container there is no pressure. Hence the type of question that's asked on the housekeeping. How can we have gas pressure without a container? And so far, not so good in terms of demonstrations. What we get is fundy assertions, which are great fun. Well, let's go outside. Well, that proves, because you've got a deep-seated fundamentalist belief that you live on a sphere, that proves that the sky is a vacuum? No, that proves you've got a fundamentalist belief that you're in a vacuum. Well, the sky's not a vacuum. The gas would fill the space. So, unfortunately, that's not a demonstration of a fundamentalist belief in heliocentrism. That's actually akin to our argument, because we would assert that, well, if you go outside and you can experience gas pressure, there's got to be the necessary antecedent, right? Because without the container, there can be no pressure. Conspiracy Cats, 2019. And that's how you quote somebody. Well, Anthony, maybe to lead on from. No biting, Anthony.
I think I think we've kind of flogged a dead horse in some respects. I think that we've made the point that many times over and over and over again that people hear it, but it doesn't go in, it doesn't register. I think it's taken that documentary for people to pay attention to it, because for the last week, everybody's been talking about whether or not gyroscopes prove anything. And that's a really good discussion to have within the community. Forget what the borders say or do. The fact that everybody in the community has got a view on it or just don't understand it. But what I want to do is just play this little snip, because the reality is that if we can conclude that a scientific experiment is one that does manipulate something to prove a cause and effect relationship, as opposed to something that just measures something, then we can distinguish between science and non-science, pseudoscience. Because if we can do that, then we can shut the door to heliocentrism, because heliocentrism only comes in through pseudoscience. So the easiest way to decide whether or not something is scientific is whether or not there was something manipulated to prove a cause and effect relationship. So this is that little song. I'm just going to play a couple of seconds of it.
Wiggle it just a little bit. I want to see you wiggle it just a little bit.
That's a groove.
That's it. If you can't wiggle it or don't wiggle it and you just measure something, then it's outside of science, right? It's interesting. It might be a correlation. It's probably pseudoscience, but it would be quite wrong for Sly Sparkane to claim that he's doing science when he's simply performing an observation. Really, that's all he's doing. So that's the reason why. Let's kick pseudoscience out, stop heliocentrism coming in, and basically tell people that claim that they're doing science that, well, what did you manipulate? And if they can't give you a straightforward manipulation and then demonstrate how they measured the variable or the effect, then it's not science. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, yeah, Tony, we were actually talking about conspiracy cats. You just completely ignored it.
No, my lead was about quoting people. I didn't know if Anthony was going to bite on that or not. It doesn't particularly matter that he didn't. But my point was it's down to who's making the claim. If somebody's claiming that there's some sort of scientific validity to their assertion, then you can hold them to task like Sly Sparkane on how much scientific validity they actually can present in their experiment, right? Well, that's what I'm kind of saying. Whereas if it comes to something like the gas pressure without a container, well, we're not talking about something that needs any sciencing. We're not talking about a cause and effect relationship. We're talking about the necessary antecedent being defied by these people that claim that the sky is a vacuum. So it depends on what claim is being made, what assertions being made, and there's loads of assertions that we have science for a globe, and there isn't any. That's why we're holding people to task on it. But again, to summarise, there's going to be people out there that, out of the goodness of their heart, that want to answer the questions that people are left with when they appreciate that they've endured the biggest deception in mankind's history. We've got a ball belief. We don't live on a spinning ball. Well, what do we live on? What is causing this, that, and the other? Well, there's going to be people that want to answer those questions, and we can only applaud them for doing so. But, in my humble opinion, the way forward is to, well, this because I've got the double-edged sword, right, and it's me chopping people's heads off on both sides. But yeah, I would prefer to focus on the people that are deceiving us in the mainstream narrative, that is to say, heliocentric narrative, and chop their heads off, because it's much more fun for me, and not very much fun chopping people like Bob's head off. I've got to be honest. Any more for any more? Or is that where we round out this show?
I've got a little bit, but I've really enjoyed tonight because it's been really good fun, and I think both me and John know, as John said there, there's places where this needs to go in terms of, for those who are, and I'm not being patronising here, a little more adept with regards to the conversation that is going off. But I think for tonight, and with regards to a lot of the baller assumptions, being able to differentiate the two things, I think, is the fundamentals that we've all got to get to. When we then start to get into starting to break down the sort of nuances of the difference between what's technology, what is science, and what's the bloody obvious, I think that's the next step. Differentiation only comes after you're able to define the criterion. And I think we live in a world right now where, for the mainstream, we're not even able to define the criteria. And once we're able to do that, then we are able to progress and argue, like I think me and John did a little bit there. And I think if I tell you what, mate, off air, I need to actually get this written down, and I'd love me and you, pal, to just go through it and underline what's science, what's thinking, what requires further scientific validation to allow X, Y, and Z, and the levels of inference that you draw from all of the multiple things we discussed tonight that might get you to a logical. And this is the most important thing for me. Doesn't matter what we've argued tonight. When we talk about the Earth and science, the two don't marry. We can only talk logic and reason if we're going to talk about the world in which we live in. And the more real good bit was Slick Johnson there, which is, where do we start from? Why are we inventing shit outside of what we experience? And yeah, I'm on my rant there.
That's good. Did you want to add anything to that, Slick?
No, it's pretty much said it all. I think it's one of those things that You just have to empty yourself. You can't go into something with a preconceived notion. You have to go in with an empty mind before you can see clearly. And Kim said it best. Not what is his name? Eban. He was talking about a martial arts person that was trying to learn from another martial artist. And what he came to find out was that he couldn't learn anything because he was already too full. He had to empty what he already had in order to get more knowledge. So when you look out at the globe, you're looking at it with a preconceived notion. Empty yourself of that and then take a look, and then things will look differently.
Absolutely. I think that might be a topic for another show if we do one, because John and I have had the similar conversation when it came to this exact subject, i.e. science, which was to say that after the fact, John said, well, it was really easy to give you this information and in an effective way for you to disseminate it because you're a blank canvas. You've not gone through the education system and learnt their way of doing it. In other words, where I say that in the classroom they tell you what science is and then immediately tell you what a molten iron core is, well, that doesn't change as you go through the education system. It gets worse. Well, fortunately for me, as the case may be, I didn't. Well, that meant that it was very easy for me to have that information poured into a blank canvas. Well, in the way Slick puts it, when you think of yourself as a glober, if you're a flat earther currently, of course, there are globers watching right now, but you weren't a blank canvas. You've got lots of preconceived notions about what things are and how they work. And yeah, you've got to empty those preconceived notions out. Any more?
I think that's the beauty of you, Nathan. You're intelligent enough to take this in, pal, and you have no preconceived notions. And just as I said, I'll give this a go. And literally, once I started engaging intellectually, you saw how quickly I realized I couldn't progress myself. And I think that's indicative. John alluded to my dealings with academia, which is, it's there. And this is the beauty of you, mate. There is none of that. And they might go, oh, you're not academically trained. Well, actually, as somebody who is probably a scientist, if you want to use that word, and is trained quite high in academia, you batter me, mate, in terms of taking on a concept, because you don't have the programming. You don't have my secondary, tertiary thoughts to reinforce how I hold shit together. You take it and you analyze it, and that's painful for some people. But for me, ego's got to go, hasn't it? And Johnson talks about getting rid of everything. I think it's not about getting rid. I think it's about re-evaluating it from this proper perspective with the correct definition of the words. Don't bin it, re-evaluate it, and then refile it in the correct place. Don't necessarily stick it back in the science drawer.
Yeah, stick it in the right category. Hopefully you guys will stick around a little bit afterwards. I'll carry on recording, but I think for the now we're going to probably bid farewell to the exceptionally good live audience. We had nearly 500 people at one stage, about 450 people watching right now. So I'm going to say a massive huge thank you to Betty, John, Ranty, Sleeping Warrior, Adam and Slick James Johnson for joining us. And if anyone wants to say goodbye or anything, this is your opportunity.
Subscribe to Ion Realm Media. We're nearly at 2,000. Come on, get us over that point with this audience. Get us over the 2,000, folks. Iron Realm Media.
I agree.
You go ahead,
Subscribe to
Ranty.
IRM. They're awesome. Every Friday they do a show.
Chance,
Seriously,
Ranty. Plug your own channel, Ranty. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Plug your own channel.
Who, me?
Yeah, do it. This is your chance. You've got 450 people watching. Plug your channel, man. Do it.
Ranty Flat Earth. Ranty Flat Earth. Yeah, subscribe. I was going to go and do an observation tomorrow. However, the skipper got in touch with the guy down in Wales and said that the weather was too bad. So I was going to travel to a different country to do this observation, by the way. And I did meet up with a flat earther today who gave me the use of a really top-end telescope, an infrared camera, infrared laser, all this kind of stuff. We've got access to drones. We've got access to remote control planes. We're going to do a ton of observations this following year, and seriously looking forward to it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's definitely my cue to round out. So with that, I will say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully sharing this first premiering, whatever you want to call it, pilot edition of BALLBUSTERS. And of course, a massive thank you to Betty, Ranty, Sleeping Warrior, Adam, Slick, and John for making this show possible. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you on the next BALLBUSTERS.